Huh. Well, you get to celebrate your birthday. Yeah, me too. I like seeing people. Oh, wow. Jacob, today's your birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Wow. Happy birthday, Jacob. Well, that's awesome. Well, I think our guest is here.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. How's it going?
Going good. Today is Jacob's birthday, and we have people like saying they're gonna go back to class. Some in September, some August 17. Some they're gonna start I think online, and then they're gonna go back to in-person class until September.
Yeah,
So,
that's how it is here too. Yep. So everybody's in high school in the San Antonio area, or?
yep, pretty much.
Okay, very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Jacob got a new gaming laptop and keyboard for his birthday. That's cool. Now you could be able to download some CAD programming.
Yeah, for sure. I do all my work on a gaming laptop.
Yep.
So did you tell him that you and I are July birthdays also?
No. Yeah, I'm July 8 and Eric is July 9.
Yeah.
So whenever we used to work together, we go celebrate our birthdays together.
Yeah, a lot of cupcakes a couple days in a row.
Yep. Okay, so we are about 22 participants, and I think we should get back to business.
Sounds good.
Okay, let me start sharing my screen. Mostly Eric will share his screen, but for now, I just want to introduce him a little bit. So can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Okay, cool. So he's the creator and pilot in command at 3DAeroventures, which is like a YouTube channel that last class we saw a video was pretty cool that you made from nothing, from scratch, from your idea, start like 3D modeling and then 3D print it and then test it and then
and the one where I almost killed myself.
Yep, and then you realize like, uh-oh, we have to change kind of like the center point of it and then start again. So he, I'm just gonna read it here. Uses engineered technology and model aviation to inspire his viewers, customers, and team members to never stop exploring, never stop questioning, and most important, never stop playing.
Yeah.
So Eric is one of my top 5 smart people. Like my circle of very smart people, my admiration and for my dear friend has been since I met him. Like he's very determined, he's very friendly. His passion and determination transfers to everything he does. He's very humble. If you want to know about something, he won't hesitate of explaining you from scratch and like explaining you again. He's that type of guy that will try to help you. And I have known him for like 8 years. Whenever he just had he has right now kids. We used to live in Bernie, but he moved to El Paso. I don't know how long ago, like.
Yeah, it's been almost exactly a year we've been in El Paso, which is where my wife and I grew up. So we live back, feels like home now.
Yeah, so. I met him when he only had 1 child and had to go to daycare, and now then they had Holly, Which how old is Holly now? Like 5?
She's 5, and our boy is 8.
Sammy's 8.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he also, we used to work together, and then he also has another company called 3
Di-Fi 3D, like Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So on this company, he does a lot of product development, and his mission is to educate their customers and their team to do potential product development. So can you share like some examples of what you have done?
Yeah, so with that company, I mostly work with inventors, so individual inventors or small companies that are a startup or small businesses looking to develop their product for the first time. So it's usually a physical product in like the plastics industry. So a lot of my job in that is more of like a consultant and just educating my customers and kind of teaching them the process of how to go through the product development process in the most efficient way.
Right, to bring like from an idea to
yeah, exactly.
And then a physical part that and if they would like to manufacture, then Eric will help them in all that process.
So my actual service, like I'll educate them through the whole process, but the actual service I provide is starting from, they'll usually come to me with just an idea in their head or, you know, a couple sketches. So I'll do the CAD development, computer 3D CAD development, usually designing for a manufacturing process that we know is potential down the road. And then I'll help them. I have a bunch of 3D printing equipment, so I'll help prototype it, usually through 3D printing, or outsource it through like a machining process. And then once we've got that, usually takes several iterations to get right. And once they're happy with their prototype, I'll hook them up with a long-term manufacturer or a higher volume manufacturer to take it from there.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So before we move forward, can you guys see Eric? And your story is very interesting. I would like for you to share, like, from your point of view, what really, like, since they are in high school and some of them, they don't know that they're gonna do like their whole life. I mean, sure. The rest of their career. From your perspective, how did you knew what you wanted to do, or like at that point? Yeah. So how do you start?
I'll try to draw back to when I was kind of in y'all's shoes in high school, and like give you a quick answer. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I think a lot of people, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, or feel free to ask questions at the end of this, but most people, like, the pressure to have to decide when you're a 17-year-old what you want to do for a career can be overwhelming.
Yeah, and I don't think that question is fair, because usually it's never a linear path. Usually it's never, oh, this is what I want to do. Usually it's a lot of readjusting and changing.
But I did know kind of who I was, what kind of passions I had as a kid, and growing up, you know, through high school, what was I good at. It's when you're trying to decide kind of, just for example, what you want to study in college, it's trying to find a balance of like, okay, I'm actually interested in this subject matter, but it also has an application in an industry, or it's something that I will actually be able to make money to support myself and my family sometime in the future. So if you're interested in German poetry, that's awesome, but you're not going to be able to make a living doing something like that. So you have to have a balance of like, okay, I'm interested in this, and I also know there's an application for it on the market, so I can get a job, and it's something that I can enjoy. But then also, like, I worked, you know, kind of odd jobs throughout college, and then as I started getting more experience throughout college and, you know, what I chose to study, I'd get internships, and that whole process was more me figuring out what I didn't want to do, or what types of jobs I didn't want to pursue. Mm-hmm. So you're almost like kind of just whittling out the fluff of what you don't want to do. And I still do that. Like, it's a constant journey of just trying to get whittled down to what you're really meant to be doing. So that's something that I still do to this day.
Yeah, and I think you have to be true to who you are. You have to be true to what you know.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of like have to do a little research or a little bit of work of kind of like knowing who you are, like what you
Sure.
like to do, what you enjoy doing. Maybe you don't like talking to people, maybe you do like
Yeah.
talking to people.
Yeah, just be honest with yourself. Like if you're an introvert and want to stay in the background, that's awesome, and you're going to have more joy in your job doing that. Or if you're really extroverted and like talking to people, go for a job, you know, that is going to bring out your personality in that way.
Right.
But yeah, even then, like you could on paper find the perfect job, but not every day is going to be, you know, sunshine and rainbows. There's going to be times when you're just kind of stressed out, and but as
Right.
long as like, you know, the majority of your day-to-day work is bringing you joy, that's kind of what you want to strive for. Or look for something where you're going to enjoy the process as well as the result of your work. Not just, you can get burnout if you really enjoy your results but you're not really enjoying the process of getting there. That's what will kind of lead to burnout.
So give us an example. So for example, one job that you didn't like whenever you were 17, and then one job
Sure.
you didn't like whenever you were on your 20s, and now that you are, I don't know how
Yeah.
old you are, but in your
Yeah.
30s.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give you kind of a progression, I guess. When I was in getting out of, I was in grad school. I had a couple internships in graduate school, and I studied manufacturing engineering in graduate school. And so I got an engineering job. I thought I wanted to work in the aerospace industry because I'm an aviation nerd. So I got a job with like one of the third largest aerospace company in the world. I had an internship in Austin, and it was
You know that.
yeah, it was a huge company, but it was, you know, just a 3-month internship for the summer. But it was a government contract company, so every project I worked on had to have, you know, government funding, and you had to bill your time to that account every 15 minutes. And you're part of this huge company that some people enjoy, but I wasn't a big fan of that. Just, you know, being a part of this, basically just a number in this huge company and having to get approval on every 15 minutes that I work. I like to have a little more freedom in what I do. And so that was, you know, I liked the projects that I was working on, and like I knew the really cool stuff that I was working on was going to these really cool military applications, but the people I worked with in the process, you know, of getting that work done was cumbersome. And then on the flip side, I got another internship after that at a really, really small medical device company as engineering work, but it was such a poorly run company. I was there for 3 months, and the CFO was 20 steps away from where I was sitting, and he never said one word to me the entire time I was there.
Wow.
And so, like, to be in that type of environment, you also, I mean, that's a really important thing to look for in a company is like, are you going to be treated like a human being? So it's all a balance, you know, through life. Even if you really enjoy the work, if you're being treated poorly, like you're going to hate it. So it made me realize then, like when I was going to graduate, I wanted to look for a job at kind of a medium-sized company that had, you know, really clear vision and really clear values and had a track record of treating their employees well. And that's when I saw the job opening at James Avery Craftsman, and this is where I met Monica. But I knew they had, you know, some really clear values and a track record for treating their employees well, because they've been around for 50 years, and I bet the average employee has been there for 20 plus years, at least when I got there.
That tell you something about the company.
Yeah, their people aren't going to stick around that long if you're treating them bad. So I worked there for that. That's just one example, I guess, of like I was saying earlier, kind of whittle through. You're going to have to kind of pay your dues,
right?
Take a shot on something, and if you don't like it, try something else. Like, you're not stuck there. So if you can find another job too, it's just, life is kind of a constant experiment. That's at least the way I see it. But so yeah, that ended up being, that's kind of what launched me into a career that I really have enjoyed as an engineer.
And how do you knew that you wanted to do like manufacture engineer?
As a kid, I mean, it stems from what I was good at and enjoyed as a kid. Like, I was one of those kids that built Legos and just kind of built things with my dad and solved problems. And so I figured engineering it's that balance of it's something I knew I would enjoy, like solving physical problems from an engineering standpoint, but then also it's applicable in the market where I could get a job doing it. So that's kind of why I settled on manufacturing engineering. But I also, it's a lot of math involved, and it's kind of a left brain activity, engineering work, but I'm also feel like I'm a pretty creative individual and I need that kind of creative outlet. So in grad school, just as a creative outlet, I minored in art and design. And so I did a lot of work with metalsmithing. And so when this job at James Avery popped up, I never anticipated going into the jewelry industry, but an opportunity popped up that happened to match some of my skills and what I had been building towards, and it ended up where I was sort of a shoe-in for that job just because the match was great. So if you tend to put yourself out there and go after things that you're passionate about that also have an application on the market, and doors tend to start to open up that way for you because people start to see like, hey, this person is passionate about what they're doing, right, and we have a need for their skill, then you're not going to have any trouble getting paid for it.
And how did you combine, or how do you decide? Because usually there's like, are you an engineer or are you a designer?
Sure.
So usually those fields, people think that they don't combine, but they're really linked together.
Yeah, I mean, they go hand in hand. A lot of times you use two separate people to get to that end goal. So like most product development firms, if they're larger, will have an engineering department and a industrial design department that they're working together to make sure, hey, this is going to look amazing, but also the engineers helping them strike a balance of like, you want to be able to make it as well. It could look great, but if it's unmakeable, then what's the point? But the flip side is you can make it so simple to manufacture, but it looks terrible that it's not going to sell. Right. So you have to strike that balance between aesthetics and functionality.
And what type of, like, you said you were doing also blacksmithing and arts and.
Yeah.
Tell us about.
Yeah. So the minor was in metalsmithing. So mostly in precious metals, and I didn't do jewelry. I just did like functional sculptures. So that's when I started getting heavier into like the CAD design stuff in my engineering courses. And so I would design all my stuff in 3D CAD first and print out 2D drawings and plans of like how I needed to cut the flat sheet metal and bend it into the sculpture that I want to do. So one example, gosh, this was in like 2008, 2009. And I don't know, people might be too young, but the connection, the charger connection on an iPod back then was a little different. It was like this really wide iPod connector. Yeah. So one of my projects was designing a functional speaker, like an external speaker for an iPod that was really ornate and made out of metal. So I sourced just the speakers with the iPod connector out of China, and I had them ship me like 15 of them. And then I made a handful of these little speakers out of like one out of copper and one out of nickel. So those are the sorts of things I would do, just something that was like unique sculptural thing that also had a function to it. So that would actually physically act as an external speaker for an iPod.
That's pretty cool.
So that sort of stuff is what scratched my itch for, it's sort of an industrial design type of thing, like what you studied, Monica. So it's striking a balance between aesthetics and function.
And what really, or what you're an inspiration for a lot of people, is kind of like having the gut to say, hey, you know what, I feel like creating my own company. And as you have been the owner of 3DAeroventures and 3DAeroventures, like, how do you took that decision, or was it a limitation in your job?
Yeah.
Or you always wanted to have your own company?
I don't know if I always did. I mean, I grew up with my dad owning his own business and kind of seeing once you build it up and, you know, have it built up enough to where you have some flexibility, just seeing that potential, I guess. And then, but more like what helped me make the decision that I wanted to explore starting my own company. I was working at James Avery, awesome company, and, you know, I was treated very well, but you're still are bound by, you know, the typical 8 to 5 kind of structure at a job. And that's probably one of the best companies you could work for. But for me personally, being bound by, you know, certain rules or, you know, certain structures wasn't what I wanted for me personally and for my family. So I wanted to have a little bit more freedom to kind of have complete decision making over, you know, my business, how I manage people and stuff like that. So like when I became kind of a middle manager at that company is what really made the decision for me. Is like I didn't really have a lot of control over the management processes within the business. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to implement change across a whole company of that size quickly. And so that's when I started. So I started doing 3D CAD work and product development just as a side gig. So I would work full time during the day, and then sometimes I'd get up at 4 a.m. and work for a few hours on, you know, side projects as a freelancer, or work late at night. And that's probably the lowest risk way to do it. Like if I would have just said, hey, I'm going to quit my job and try it out without ever proving whether or not I could do it, like I probably would have failed. But instead I said, okay, I want to gain experience in other industries. Cause at that point I only had product development experience in the jewelry industry. So let me start out super cheap. I started out at like 15 or 20 bucks an hour, which is really low for a freelance engineer. And just let's build up some experience working with people in other industries doing product development. And, you know, once my clientele kind of bumped up enough to justify raising my rates, I just kind of slowly, so this was like a 2-3 year process of just slowly raising my rates until I was consistently making enough at, you know, 10 to 20 hours a week just on the side. Mm-hmm. I could just do the math and say, okay, now I've proven I can work 20 hours a week on the side. If I quit my day job and double my hours to 40, I'll know I'm bringing in this much to support me and my family. So it was a really low risk way to kind of build up to jumping over to doing my own thing. And like Dave Ramsey calls it, getting the lifeboat closer to the dock before you make the jump. So like my part-time job was my lifeboat while I was on, on like, this really steady dock of a day job.
Yeah, like trying something, and once you got it on target, and
yeah, I mean, it's an experiment, but it's a low risk way of doing it. Like, so I felt once you do the math that, you know, if I built it up to where I would be full time, then I knew I would be bringing in enough to where I wasn't putting myself like at a financial risk.
And what have you learned in all this journey that have like, or what's your mantra that has like really stick to you?
Mantra.
Like, I don't know, what's kind of like your...
Yeah, I gotcha. Like one key thing, I guess. Let me think. I mean, the thing that kind of is constantly, and I'm still going through it today, that you're never going to fully have the answer on what the right decision is to do all the time. Like I said it a little while ago, like it's a constant experiment of like, let's just experiment with this new thing. If it works, then we'll run with it. If not, then we'll try something else.
Right.
So it is sort of an engineering mindset of like, let's, you know, I have a hypothesis this might work. Yeah. And then you test it out. If it doesn't work, you stop it, or if it continues to work, then you just go full speed with it.
That's very good. I have heard a lot of that in like the books that I'm reading, or people like, okay, try something, and then once you get something that you like, or something that you say this is gonna work, then give everything.
Yeah. So don't feel like you have to know what you need to do now, like all the way.
Agile.
Yeah.
Like try something, change
Exactly.
it, adapt.
Yeah, I think where people get in trouble is like in two ways. Like you either feel like you have to have all figured out before you start doing something, or if you start something and you don't like it, you feel like you're stuck there for a while. Whereas like you're not a victim. Like you can go explore a totally different avenue.
Right.
And start it on the side. Like there's definitely ways to find time to start doing something on the side that you think you might be more enjoyable, and then get to a point where you can jump over to that.
So as I can see, like in you have always invested time on what you like too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whether it's a business endeavor or just a hobby.
Mm-hmm. So,
That's why like in 3DAeroventures, that's more of a, I make a little bit of money off it, but it's more of a just a passion project on the side.
so tell us about it. How did it start? Because that seems pretty cool. Probably a lot
Yeah,
of people are interested.
yeah, and things just kind of build on each other as you go throughout your career. And oh, hold on, my phone is ringing. Can I come right back? My doorbell rang. I think I locked my kids out of the house.
Mm-hmm. So we can check out his website. Let me see if you can. Okay, you're back.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you were good. We were gonna check 3D. I think I have it here.
There you go.
Oh no,
That's the website. Yeah.
I wanted to see the YouTube channel.
Oh, sure. You've got YouTube open there
Mm-hmm.
on one of your tabs. There you go. Oh, it's arrow. Take out the AD in the middle of that. There you go. Take out the A. Here, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. See,
Yeah.
I'm not subscribed yet.
Oh, what the heck?
I know.
So this started. So I work in a CAD program called SolidWorks, which I know you're familiar with, Monica.
Yeah.
And so the company SolidWorks, when I first started doing, my own business, I also was doing some blogging. And so I reached out to them, like their corporate headquarters, and asked them if they wanted any, needed any like tutorial content or blog content for their website, and ended up starting to work with them where they would buy YouTube tutorial content from me on like how to model a certain thing in SolidWorks, and they would publish it under their own name on their YouTube channel. And then last year, I was doing that for a couple of years, and then last year they approached me about just starting my own YouTube channel, and I could, as long as it was kind of CAD and product development related, I could do it around whatever subject I wanted to. So I chose something that I was passionate about as a kid and still did. It's just like my nerdy hobby is remote control airplanes. And so I decided to start developing 3D printable functional remote control planes using their software. And so they sponsored me to kind of get it off the ground. And that kind of led to some speaking opportunities with them at some of their conference stuff. And so that's been really cool. And then,
no, keep going.
So once I started doing some videos, they started getting some hits, and decided to start selling what I've designed. I've put them together as like a digital product, so people can, if they're into remote control planes and they have 3D printers at home, which a lot of people into RC modeling have 3D printers, they can purchase and download the digital files that I sell and make their own at home, just like the ones I have on the videos. So that's where I am now. Yeah.
And the infinity wing, how do you come up with that idea?
I saw something similar in college. It wasn't quite the same. Like the way the wingtips kind of wrap around and connect the two wings was different, but it's something I had always thought about since college, wanting to do my own version of it. And so, yeah, I just experimented with that and did several tests. You saw one of the tests that I almost killed myself in the video. But yeah, that one, yeah, that's super, it's really rewarding once you go through some failures in an experiment like that and then come out the other side like with the success. It's really rewarding. So,
Right. And
yeah.
can you share a little bit of like SolidWorks and how SolidWorks have really jump like your ideas to really bring them to life, or kind of like experiment with
Yeah.
like dynamics, or how can they right now, since they're young, they could start learning by themselves and just learn the basics?
Yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned to me earlier that you've shared Fusion 360
Yeah,
with
kind of
them.
like David, one of my a technical designer here at James Avery, kind
Uh-huh.
of did a 3D workshop and
Okay.
explain it with Fusion, how Fusion 360 is kind of like free, and they could start with
Yeah,
fundamentals. And but
for
his
sure.
advice was kind of like really like understand one software, and that will translate, or understand like drawing by hand, and that
Yeah.
will translate your ideas.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a really good place to start since it's free. And a lot of I've played with it a little bit, and a lot of the tools are very similar. The language that they use in that software is very similar to, so you'd be able to jump over to a more popular kind of industry software. If that's something you wanted to do for work, you could jump over to SolidWorks and probably pick it up pretty quick. But I know that SolidWorks also has a student license that I think it's $100 a year, to, which might be a lot for a high school kid, but it's, I mean, it's one of the most widely used CAD software in the engineering field. So if, and they may even have some free options for, especially for high school students. A lot of high schools offer it. And um, if it's something you just want to get a bunch of experience with, and there's a lot of community colleges that offer, will offer like a week-long class, and you can just knock it out in a week, 40 hours, and learn a ton about how to use the software. So, and that's, a relatively inexpensive class. So that's a good option. But yeah, I think, at least for me, whether it's SolidWorks or Fusion 360, like, it's kind of an art form for me. It's like, that's my medium versus like paper and pen. And so I'll just start from scratch in CAD, and once you get proficient with it, you can quickly knock out all these different ideas in different forms, and being able to see it in 3D is awesome. So like, just see it at every angle. Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I would say most people just would start with sketching it out first, figure it out, kind of what you want your initial form to be, and then translate it into CAD. But yeah, so when I'm starting with like for a new aircraft design, if there's already one to reference off of, like if I'm trying to model after a scale, like a full scale aircraft, I'll find a bunch of drawings online that are, those are free, and I can pull those images into the CAD software and start sketching on top of that to get
Like
the forms right. Yeah, either a blueprint or even just like a perfect side view image of the aircraft, right? Of like the physical plane. I can pull that in and start sketching around it to get the form just right for my kind of scaled down model. So yeah, if you want, I can go through a little bit. I have like a PowerPoint just that shows kind of how I go about
that'll be
designing the aircraft and stuff.
perfect.
How much time do we have?
Like 20 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that'll be good. Well,
and then if they have questions, they could start.
Sure, I'll leave a 5 or 10 minutes for questions. You see that?
Yes.
So I'll just kind of go through kind of some bullet points, but essentially we'll talk about how I designed this strong and lightweight 3D printed structure so these actually fly. And then a really important industry term is designing for manufacturing, or DFM. So this is something I use in whether I'm working on a plastic injection product for another customer, I have the end manufacturing process in mind when I'm designing the parts. So in this case, my manufacturing process is 3D printing. So I design the parts so that they 3D print without needing a bunch of support structures, and they come off really clean off of the printer. And then also another term is DFA, or design for assembly. So in this case, you can see this image on the bottom here. I split the parts to be basically manageable 3D printable chunks, but then they need to key together perfectly. When you glue it all together, there isn't any misalignment. So I design things to either glue together, or a lot of them I want to be able to take the wings off to transport them, so they're designed to screw together. And then designing like off-the-shelf components to screw on or fit perfectly inside the parts, like the motor and little servos and stuff like that. And then I can touch a little bit on like the assembly and some of the finishing, like I can paint some of them or just print them in different colors and test flights and stuff. So we've talked about this a little bit. So I started this channel really just to encourage viewers to kind of never give up on what they were passionate about growing up. So in my case, it was RC aircraft. I can't tell you how many people I've come across that like, man, I used to drive RC cars when I was a kid, or used to do this when I was a kid. And it's something I could have continued doing as an adult, and just kind of gave up on it because my priorities changed. But that, I hear a lot of people saying, I wish I could get back into some of the hobbies that, I was passionate about when I was younger.
Right.
So I've got about 20 years experience doing this, since I was 12. But prior to starting this, as we discussed, I have a 10 years experience as a product development engineer, primarily designing. So those terms DFM and DFA is designing for manufacturing for plastic injection, and 3D printing or additive manufacturing, same thing. So first step in my process is designing a really strong and lightweight structure. So it has to be light enough to provide a suitable wing loading, or be light enough to actually fly, but strong enough to handle the forces of flight. So the design, you can kind of see in this image, there's this really unique ribbing structure in there that kind of zigzags throughout the wings. And they're designed that way so that as it's printing, they self-support. So if I had them all kind of going horizontal, I would need to build in some support structures as it's printing that would be removed later.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, but now I don't have to do that because they self-support as they kind of zigzag and print. So there's an internal kind of scalable structure like that, and then just a really thin outer shell, and everything prints as one. And then there's additional off-the-shelf components that I design in, like carbon fiber rods will help connect the wings so that you get them really strong but lightweight. And then I touched on, continuing with DFM. So like I said, they're designed to be 3D printed on just these hobbyist printers, and when I put my camera back on, I've got all these printers in the background, but they're just hobbyist level printers. Anybody who's into 3D printing is pretty familiar with them. And they're printed in a material called PLA, which is a really inexpensive plastic, but it's really rigid. So it's good for these aircraft. It's not incredibly strong. So if you have, kind of a minor crash or something, you'll get some cracks, but for basic flight and landings and takeoffs, it works fine. And like I touched on a minute ago, majority of the parts are designed to self-support as they 3D print. So there aren't any support structures needed as it's printing. And so once I have the kind of full shell of the aircraft design, I just split it up into these manageable chunks, and they're just glued together with super glue for the most part. And then I use off-the-shelf hardware like bolts and nuts. And there's these little brass inserts that I put in that have threads that can just sink them into the parts with like a soldering iron. So you can build in these little brass threaded areas where you're going to be constantly screwing and unscrewing like the wings off of the plane.
So did you photo the motor too?
The motor is just screwed on. I don't know if you can see like my arrow, but the motor is just screwed onto the front, and those are just off-the-shelf electric motors that are made specifically for remote control planes. And then there's other electronics, like there's a little motorized servo that moves the control surfaces so you can control the plane in the air. And then there's a remote control system. So on board the aircraft is a receiver, and then in your hand is a transmitter or a remote control that just communicates with the plane while it's up in the air.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And then just a note on some of the materials. Like I said, typically I'm using PLA, which is a really stiff, rigid plastic, but there's all this new research coming out with 3D printable materials. Like for these little microplanes, I use a material called lightweight PLA. And as it prints, it actually has a foaming property to it. So you print it at an elevated temperature and it foams, which makes it super low density. So it's a really, really lightweight material. So it's good for aircraft applications. And yeah, this just showing I just use super glue for the most part to glue all the components together. And screws, and there's those little heat set inserts I was talking about. So you just you melt those into the part, and then you've got a permanent metal thread.
Wow.
Designed into the part. So, and oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of an electric motor being screwed on, and the servos are screwed into the wings to be able to control the control surfaces. And then all these parts can be sanded and painted. Like the one on the right that's real colorful, was all actually printed in a gray plastic, but sanded down and painted all these different colors to.
Good job. I remember seeing that one at the SolidWorks.
Yeah, so that one, I'm almost done developing that one. I'll have it ready for sale pretty soon. I've already test flown it and stuff, so I hadn't flown it yet before that event where I saw you. I had just finished it like the week before putting it together, but I've since flown it. It flies really well. I'm just finishing up the design a little bit.
Well,
so
we might need to see the YouTube video.
Oops. Yeah, here's a video. Can you see that?
Yes.
I don't think you can hear any sound, can you? Can you hear the sound or no?
No.
Yeah. I think I have. It'll show some of that new plane flying as well. There we go. I'll just show a little bit of it.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's better with sound so you can hear the motor and stuff, but
Probably you can hear it.
I can.
Yeah, so I encourage you guys to follow Eric on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll come out with this one soon. So anyways, there's some pros and cons to like every building technique in this hobby. And some of the pros of 3D printing is the file, like if someone who's in the hobby were to purchase the files and the materials needed to make the aircraft, it's pretty inexpensive compared to other materials. And then once your printer's kind of dialed in, the printing process is pretty hands-off, so you're not having to do a lot of physical building. And once the parts are printed, the assembly process is really simple. Everything just keys together perfectly. You just glue it together. The biggest benefit, in my opinion, is 3D printing opens the doors. Like you can do really unique forms with 3D printing that you couldn't do with other manufacturing processes. So it kind of opens the door to like unique concept aircraft like that Infinity Wing one I've done, or some rarely modeled scale aircraft that people haven't modeled before. but some of the cons versus like a lot of RC aircraft are made of wood or fiberglass or foam. Those are really robust materials and lightweight. So typically these plastics are a little bit heavier and not as crash resistant. And so a little more care has to be taken with them than some of the other materials. So that's quick. I know that was quick, but just kind of an overview of how I go about designing like a functional RC model through 3DAeroventures.
Go back.
There?
Yeah. And then once you print one,
yeah. Yeah, once you have the digital files, like, that's the cool part. If you break one little component, you can just reprint that one component.
Yeah.
So purchasing the files is just a one-time cost. You have them permanently. You can reprint anytime you want. Versus like you buy a kit, so they still sell wooden kits that like have the ribs all cut out, and the kits are 150 or 200 bucks, and you could spend a month or two building it from a pile of wood. If you crash it, you got to go buy a whole new kit.
And you can buy your own pernet with that kind of money.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, guys. So how about some questions that you have for Eric?
I don't know if I can see the. Oh, yeah, let me open up the chat. You just do the questions through the chat.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait a couple minutes and see.
That's cool.
So what's in the background? All your filament, different colors?
Yeah. Oops. My dog is in here. You want to say hi? Ooch. Yeah. So these are 4 of my printers. I have about a dozen printers, but those are some that I use for the actual airplanes, and then just some spare material and stuff, and then other printers over here. These ones actually print out of a liquid resin, so you're familiar with these, Monica, from James Avery. But super high detail prints that I use mostly for product development stuff, not really for the plane.
Awesome.
There's a couple questions.
Yes.
How long does it take to craft one of those planes? So like the initial development it's 100 hours of work probably. I mean, once you iterate on a couple designs and tweak things. So like, I'll think I have it all kind of figured out for the first initial design, and I'll test fly it, and testing the assembly for the first time and the flight for the first time, I'm always going to have changes. So sometimes the changes, going back and changing a CAD model, takes more time than the initial development. But yeah, I'd say it'll average somewhere between 100 and 150 hours of CAD work. The actual printing time, because I have enough printers, just takes a couple days. But if you had one printer, it'd be, I don't know, a week or 2 to 3D print all the parts. Benicio asked, what's your most proud build? Probably that Infinity Wing one, just because it's so unique, and that's kind of what got me started with this kind of adventure on the side, and it got a lot of attention, which is cool. Like, I didn't start the YouTube channel thinking I'd get several 100,000 views on a video, and that one caught people's attention. So that's probably my most proud. The one closest to my heart is that new one that's real colorful, that red, white, and blue one. That particular model is like designed after a full-scale airplane, but I had a really similar model as a kid. It was like one of the first ones my dad and I ever built together. So that was one where you would buy a kit and build it out of wood and cover it yourself. So that one has some special meaning to me, I guess. What's the smallest?
Did your dad tell you about it?
What's that?
Did your dad remember building it with you?
Yeah, for sure. I designed this one sort of as an homage to him. I told him about it. He's not a very emotional guy, so he was like, "That's cool." So he doesn't we don't get real emotional with each other, but yeah, he and I had an awesome relationship growing up. He was super supportive of my hobbies, I have two brothers, and so he was always supportive of them as well. So. Lucy asked the smallest and largest thing I've created.
Tell them about remember you kind of like were telling me that one time you had a client that you had to, like his dog was sick and they were going to do surgery on him and you built kind of like
yeah. No, so this was he was a veterinary surgeon. So he owned a company where he was a mobile vet. So whenever local veterinary clinics around San Antonio had, too many cases that he would go around and help them do surgeries. So he had this one really unique case at the San Antonio Humane Society where a dog's jaw was fused together from a past injury. It healed really funny, and the upper jaw was fused to the lower jaw, and they couldn't really see what was going on physically. So they had a scan done. I don't remember, CAT scan probably. And he sent me the CAT scan data, and he said, if you can figure out how to like take this data and convert it into a 3D printable 3D model and just print me a little chunk of the side of the dog's face so I can physically hold it and see exactly what's going on. Because the CAT scan takes I could basically just whittle the CAT scan down to the skeletal structure of the dog and just pull out this little chunk that he was most interested in and 3D print that out. I have it here. Hold on, let me see. I don't have the print, but I do have some images somewhere. I can share my screen.
And then also the other person that was kind of like a professional bow racer or bow, and he needed specifically something that will help him.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
I'll show you that as well. So that's the dog.
Mm-hmm.
But here's how this CAT scan data came to me, or CT scan. And then I was able to just kind of whittle it down to, there was an area kind of right here on the left side of the dog's face that the jaws had fused together. So you can see where it's kind of fused. That's the little 3D printed portion of its skull.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really cool. The surgeon was able to, take that physical 3D model and see what's going on, on the outside face of the dog, and then also internally inside the jaw based on that 3D print. And so he knew once he went into surgery to fix that area exactly what to remove, because he'd already seen it without cutting the dog open. And so this picture, I actually took this picture of the dog. This was a week or so after the surgery, and it was able to open its mouth and started learning how to eat again and stuff like that. Mm. So pretty cool. And he did all that pro bono for free. Oh, there you go. Mm. He did it all for free for the Humane Society. And I can't remember the name of that bow hunter company that you brought up, but it's a case of an inventor. Most of the inventors I work with, the reason they come up with an invention is because they have a passion for whatever they're doing. So this guy is a passionate and accomplished bow. He did like competition bow shooting. So he would shoot to targets as a competition. He's one of the best in Texas, I think. And he developed a product for bow hunters. It's like a little light for the scope that goes on your bow hunter. It's really small LED light with an enclosure. So I worked with him to design the enclosure portion for his little electronic light. So that's just kind of one example. Any more questions? What's the smallest and largest thing you've created? So the smallest stuff is probably jewelry type stuff that I worked with Monica on, and that's a really interesting process. Have you talked to them much about?
No, not
like,
as good as you do.
Well, James Avery, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with James Avery, but it's a cool company. They think of themselves, at least in product development and manufacturing, they think of themselves more as small parts manufacturer than a jewelry company. So, but at the same time, you know, the design aspect of their jewelry is incredibly important. So they have a knack for making a piece of jewelry 10,000 times a year, but it looks like it was handmade. So it was really cool. And I'm sure you'd agree with this, Monica, but it's just cool to be an engineer there where you're figuring out how to mass produce this kind of handmade looking thing, and you're taught really well how to have an eye for detail, but then also how to figure out how to make it.
Now that you said it, I don't think I have talked much about James Avery.
Yeah, you should tell them about what you do there or what you've done there in the past. It's a cool process. You should be your own special guest.
Right? Maybe we should do that for our last class.
Yeah. The largest thing I've created is that new plane I'm working on, that real colorful one. It's got like a little over 5 foot wingspan, so it's pretty good size. Ramya asked what gave me the inspiration for the models of the other planes I built. I just look for stuff that hasn't really ever been modeled before or rarely modeled, but also I think is going to fly really well. So I want to make sure whoever buys these, or for me personally, like, because I actually want to fly them on a regular basis, so I want to make sure they fly well, but are also kind of a unique design that people haven't modeled before. So those are the two kind of most important things I look at.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see Eric in 10 years? What's your vision? Or how do you know where you're moving forward?
I'd like to keep building up this 3DAeroventures thing, but not as like a personal gain, more as I see it as an avenue, like a teaching avenue, especially for kids and stuff. I think at least in the United States, like the engineering profession is kind of going down every year. And the reason I got into engineering is because of aviation and model aviation. And so I could see 3DAeroventures building towards having sort of a nonprofit avenue of like doing some build classes with kids or middle schoolers or something, and just trying to introduce people into, or kids into 3D printing and engineering work, but also teaching them some like traditional building skills of like gluing things together and working with their hands. And so and then the artistic side of like decorating an airplane or something like that. Like, so it'd be a really cool STEM or STEAM initiative.
Right.
That's kind of one of my goals, at least with 3DAeroventures in general. And then me personally, like, I just want to enjoy who I work with, no matter what I'm doing, what type of work, enjoy the people I work with, and then I'm wanting to make sure the work I do is enough to support me and my family, so we can just have fun together. So that's my biggest goal.
That's awesome. I think that's a great way to conclude this meeting, and thank you so much for your time. And
thanks for the kind words, and it's been a pleasure working with you over the years, and that's awesome what you're doing with the kids. Like, being able to teach this year is pretty cool.
And I'll recommend that, like, for STEM for future years. I think that they'll enjoy building from scratch or from idea, and then modeling and then 3D printing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be something very interesting too.
Yeah, be fun. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, we got enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much, Eric. It was nice
Thanks for having me.
after a long time.
Yeah, I know. We'll keep in touch.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.